That's
Okay.
correct.
Yeah. Alex Vecca, and we're going to be talking about traveling as a means for personal growth. And so we're going to get into the weeds about traveling and all that, and what all that entails. But yeah, without any further ado, Alex, welcome to the Moses Kabandana Podcast.
Thanks a lot, Moses, for having me here. Hi, listeners. Glad to be here. And yeah, my name is Alex. I'm originally from Belarus. Since I remember myself, I would say I was quite, let's say, active, curious, impatient kid. So I was always enchanted by the possibility to travel. Like the first travels with my family was like, wow, I wanted to repeat, to do it again. So I think since then I had a chance to visit some places during, my childhood, some countries in Europe specifically, in Africa. And then, I decided, okay, I just want my goal for this life is to discover of this world as much as I can, and to give this world as much as I can. So that's why, like my main purpose is, definitely fulfill my potential by doing, as much as I can, no, for the society, for the people around me, business wise, relationship wise. And one of the means of this is traveling. Yeah. So that's why I decided I always loved languages. I always loved geography, history. I decided to study international tourism for my bachelor and master degrees. In the end, my PhD was about tourism as well. And now I'm also running a travel company here in Mexico City. So that's a little bit about myself.
That is That's quite an introduction. And so real quick, Belarus, I'm very ignorant, right? And so I'm going to ask a dumb question. What is the primary language of Belarus?
I think first of all, there is never dumb question. The only dumb thing is not to ask question when you have it, I think. So all the questions are good because we grow and learn by this. Belarus is actually the biggest landlocked European country. I mean, we are number one at least in something, yeah. So it's bigger than Switzerland, than Slovakia, than Czech Republic, 207,000 square kilometers. It's landlocked literally between Russia and European Union. Ukraine in the south, Poland to the west, Lithuania and Latvia to the west, northwest.
Okay, and what language is it?
The languages. There are two
Yeah.
official languages in Belarus. The first one is Belarusian. The second one is Russian. At the moment, most of the people in urban areas, due to post-Soviet and currently like a lot of Russian influence, they speak Russian.
Yeah.
For example, my parents, they were born unilingual, monolingual. They just spoke Belarusian when they were born. And then when they went to school, in the secondary school, they learned Russian. And in Soviet Union, the situation was if you wanted to grow the social ladder, career-wise and so on, you had to study university. And all universities were in Russian. And then they also were mixing people from different countries. You finish your university, you go to this city to work. And then you go to this city in different countries that speak different language. So people had to start speaking Russian between each other. So that's also, I come from a third biggest city. It's not big. It's like 400,000 people called Mohyliov in eastern part of Belarus. So when, my parents right now, they are bilingual. But I remember always myself when I was going back to the countryside, was where my parents from. My grandparents, they would speak Belarusian or some kind of a mixture, dialect, Belarusian with a little bit of Russian. So I consider myself bilingual from the very childhood. Yeah. And then my kindergarten was Belarusian, but then, political situation in the country changed and the Russian influence came into. So I already went to Russian speaking school, but my brother, elder brother, he's 4 years older, he started in Belarusian school. So this is the thing. It's more or less Belarusian and Russian. It's same language family, Slavic language family. And if you can compare Portuguese and
Spanish?
Italian or Portuguese and Spanish, it's more or less the same. Let's say I had some friends when I studied in Italy in the exchange program. I had some Portuguese friends, so they were always kind of like happy and proud of themselves because we are a small nation, but we are very smart. We Portuguese understand well Spanish, but Spaniards don't understand us. No, so I would say something like this: Russians don't really understand Belarusian because because it's quite different linguistically. But Belarusians understand Russian just because we learn it. And currently the situation could be compared, for example, to the one from Ireland. No, if you say Irish, like, hey, you are English, they will probably, the best what they could do, the most diplomatic would say, no, I'm not. And they are proud to be Irish. They have their own language. When you go in the countryside, there are like 2 signs. And in some rural areas, most of the people speak Irish. So the situation is kind of similar in Belarus. The national identity in all Belarusians, people all know Belarusian. They understand, they read books. There are some, subjects in school that are, obligatory just in this language. But statistically, for daily life, most people use Russian in their daily communication, at least in the urban areas, which are around 70% of the population. In the rural areas, it's some places more Belarusian, some places it's mixture, either mixture Russian Belarusian or purely Belarusian, different dialects.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, are there sounds, like English sounds, that are harder to pronounce for someone that speaks Belarusian? Like, for example, I'm from Rwanda, so we speak Kinyarwanda. That's the local language. And any sounds that start with a letter L, like lake, we just cannot pronounce the L. We replace the L with an R, so rake, right? So like, are there sounds like that are just like English sounds that are quite difficult to, or letters that are quite difficult to pronounce for a Belarusian?
It depends. For some people, let's say, I would probably compare with Russian, because that's kind of like two competing languages. So in Belarusian, for example, the R is always, R is always firm. So in Russian, you can say ребята, for example, like guys, boys. And in Belarusian, it just doesn't exist. It's always firm. So for people who are like, just monolingual or mostly Belarusian speakers, they would not be able to pronounce. It would be rabята or something like this. In Russian, there is sh. In Belarusian, it doesn't exist. In Russian, there are 33 letters. In Belarusian, 28 letters. Belarusian is more phonetical language. Yeah, there are two sounds that are very distinctive for Belarusian language, and any other language like Slavic language, always maybe Polish a little bit. They don't have it. First one is called d. So, for example, when there is d, and it comes with soft letter like ye, yo, ya, it becomes d. And it's like very, very dekanya. It's called dekanya, the process, like linguistical. And the second one is ch. So, for example, t with ye, yo, ya become ch. So it's tekanya. No, for example, in Polish they have a little bit of that. And then another interesting thing is it's called akanya. Everything what is o, sometimes when it's o and it has a stress, for example, dom, which is a casa, house, a couple of houses, damy, it will become and it's written like this. And there is one also letter, it's called uniskladovaya. It's basically like it's u, but as far as we normally right now use Cyrillics, it's in Latin it's like epsilon, like y, like y. No, and at the top there is kind of like this kind of apostrophe, and it's basically w. So, for example, wolf or bow in English, in the end, this kind of stuff, it's w. It doesn't exist in other Slavic languages. Even like we have a monument to this letter, which is the only letter in anywhere else they have it. So there are these kind of like things. But I would say also, if we speak about, let's say, Russian speakers in the post-Soviet Union, people from Ukraine and people from Belarus and people from, Moscow region and people from far away, far east, and people in Kazakhstan, it's completely different, I would say, intonation. And in my perspective, because, I personally love languages. I dedicated a lot of time to do it. Maybe recently I don't practice that much. But for me, this kind of linguistical, cultural, and geographical factors, the landscapes, in some countries you go and they live in the mountains. So it's like they need to shout, hey, you. So that's why the way how they talk is like this. And there are some other countries that they live, there is like a lot of forest, so it's completely different. Some So let's say the way how Belarusian speaks Russian and the person from Kazakhstan speaks Russian, it's completely different. Yeah, I mean the accent, the intonation.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, wow. Thank you for that lesson. I'm gonna have to come back and re-listen to a lot of this. And so let's get back to the traveling side of your story here. What was the very first country outside of Belarus that you went to? Like, do you remember?
Ukraine. Ukraine,
Okay.
since the very beginning, was a very popular summer destination. It has very beautiful, Black Sea coast, Crimea Peninsula, that unfortunately at the moment is not under control of Ukraine. That was like our main. We have some family there, so almost every summer we would go either by train, by bus, or we would drive. So it would be like a way. If my father would drive, we would stay somewhere on the road because it's almost 24 hours driving. But it doesn't really matter when you're a kid or even like you're an adult and you're that's like the time when we go to the beach. It doesn't matter, and it's always journey, always adventure. So that was Ukraine, where we went there several times.
And what was your biggest fear as a kid?
My biggest fear. I remember I loved swimming. I'm Pisces by zodiac, and I love rain. For example, right now it's raining here in Mexico City, but I love it. It's like it gives me peace. It's not that hot.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit, and then I did swimming, I was doing professionally, like participating in some competitions and so on. But before that, I remember even when I was like, I have always been swimming well. I had this kind of fear of the unknown when you swim. Especially when it's dark in the bottom, and you're like, okay, and you try to no, Alex, you know how to swim, you're a man, or like, okay, you do it, you can do it, and then like, no, but you still you still have fear about that. I think like even sometimes being an adult, I mean, once in a while you could feel, especially in the open sea, swimming, sometimes here in Mexico, you would go like a couple of kilometers to some island and then you want to come back and there is no one else around, but just keep quiet. And that's one of the fears that comes to my mind right now.
Yeah, the fear of the deep is a common one, especially the ocean, like just not knowing what lies beneath you, and so when did you learn English?
At school, I remember, from kindergarten, they have been introducing all this kind of, yellow, spring, summer, autumn, and winter, yellow, and this kind of stuff. And then, like, from the first grade, I was lucky to go to, like, a school that was specialized in languages, like a public school. So they gave pretty good background. I think in the first grade, we started with German as well. That later helped me a lot to enter the university in Prague because it was international relations faculty. So since then, it's just like practicing. And I think mostly when learning languages, foreign languages, even if you don't, I think the most kind of like important is practicing, having the environment, to ideally the native environment, if you can go to some country where you have to do it. But before that, is the attitude. If you know the answer to the question why, I think why is probably one of the most useful and important questions you can ask to yourself and to people, not to assume, but like that's in terms of communication. But when we talk to ourselves, we need to understand, if I need to invest this time in learning the language, why do I need it? And then that's when it comes how much attitude you put inside. And since the kid, I always knew I want to go and study abroad. I want to go to discover the world. And at least, the very least, I need English. If I can know German, it's good. If I can later learn some other language, it's perfect. But the minimum one is language.
Yeah.
So.
And so what would you say is like the biggest tip that you can give someone that is trying to learn a language? Like, for me, is because I feel like a lot of people have the fear of pronouncing things wrong. They're like, man, I'm already old, so it's harder to learn a language when you're older than when you're younger. And I think by the time I was 10, I had learned and forgotten 2 languages. No, I had learned 3 languages and forgotten 2. That is true. So because I was young. But then I also know that when I was so young, I was like I would move to a different place where I don't know the language, and the only way that I can communicate with other kids is by spending a lot of time with other kids. So if you correct for the amount of time that I spent listening to that language and just listening to other people speaking that language and trying to speak that language, it ends up being the same amount of time that it took for me to learn a language as a kid as it did when I was an adult. So it came down to the amount of time spent, actually listening to the language and practicing it. And so my biggest tip for people when it comes to languages is how much time are you putting in learning to actually practice so that you can get over the fear of pronouncing things wrong. But as a step zero, just exposing yourself to the different sounds. Just listen to the music, watch your movies, even if you don't understand anything, so that your brain can start to get accustomed to the sounds, these foreign sounds that to you don't mean anything. So what would you say for you are like some of the like one or two big tips for people that are trying to learn a language?
I would completely agree with the first tip. I mean, it's to try to get rid of fear, or at least to face it and to understand, okay,
Yeah.
I have a fear about talking. What am I, there is like a 5 questions rule. If you want to know the real reason, ask yourself 5 questions. No, it's like, oh, why I have fear about the languages? Oh, I don't want to feel like dumb or ridiculous. What's going to happen to you? Is it going to hurt or something? No, nothing. I mean, I'm going to feel the same. But what kind of like advantage so I can learn the language? And so in the end, if we do this like logical sequence of questions, there is no fear. I mean, fear, it's a fictitious thing. For most of the things we fear in our life, it just doesn't exist. It's here in our head. And if we ask like a couple of questions ourselves, why we have this fear, it's just for some really silly things that, don't really matter. So I think the first one is just like to expose, to not have fear. I remember when I was a teenager or some, I was like really more into like having a good pronunciation, for example. Right now, I think my pronunciation is okay, but I know that it has this like tone of like Eastern European someone, from there. And I don't want to even get rid of this because it's part of my identity. If at some point I live in, I don't know, UK or United States and it changes, it's absolutely fine. Now sometimes I live in Mexico City, I speak in Spanish, and some people say, oh, the first I heard you're from here. And only then, you see, okay, you struggle with some words. Okay, yeah. So I think the first one is get rid of fear. Yeah, like and practice as much and enjoying it,
Yeah.
And the second one would be having like understand why you want this language. If you want it for work,
Okay.
if you want it for your studies, if you want it for just like for communication, if it's something really important, it will be enough trigger for you to actually get rid of fear first, and second, to expose yourself, to practice, to listen, do mistakes. The third one is like do mistakes, practice as much as possible. Mistakes is our best ally in learning languages. So, and then of course, like investing enough time to this. But even if you do it naturally, like for example, I used to live in China for 2 years, and I did some basic Mandarin course at my university. Then I was practicing there. I did some courses, but I never actually went to study it in a structured way to get some level. Unfortunately, and maybe that's something I later regretted because I had an amazing opportunity. Now I live here in Mexico City, and the place where I live, there are like quite a lot of like, let's say, Chinese people. They do their business and everything. So I have a chance to talk. And sometimes like I just like catch myself on idea. I'm here, Alex, practice. Say good morning, say hello, how are you? Tell who you are. You're not gonna feel ridiculous. And a couple of times I just like kind of pressed myself like not doing that. Because again, for this unexplainable fear. And then at some point I decided, okay, I don't care. And I spoke. And that much amount of energy, that much amount of positive actually energy, smiles, interchanging, people seeing you and like their interest, it gives so much. Basically, communication, I think, is one of the like just talking to people is one of the best ways how people can be happy. Talking to people, sharing smiles, sharing emotions, seeing them, feeling them, instead of being inside of ourselves and like, trying to look away from somebody who we can say hello to, even like people who we don't know. So this is like an amazing advantage, just like to go out and talk to people. It feels good.
No, I definitely agree. Fear, I think a lot of it has to do with the fear of the unknown. We just don't know what's going to happen when we try something that we've never tried before. And so we end up giving fear more power than it actually has. To some degree, it's important to be afraid, right? Especially when you're trying something that it could have negative consequences. But just to remember that, to not give fear more power than it actually deserves. So quick question here that I wrote for you is like what? Well, first of all, so two questions. One, how many languages do you speak? And two, which one was the hardest one to learn for you?
Right now, I mean, speaking, maybe I'm quite demanding to myself in terms of like defining what is speaking, what is not. I used to speak fluently, like intermediate level. Right now, I fluently speak Belarusian, Russian, obviously Spanish, English, and Czech because I lived there for almost 7 years. I studied in Czech Republic. Before I was pretty fluent, especially during the time of traveling, whenever you travel in some country and you need to talk the same day with, you feel like you can communicate really well. I used to speak well Serbian and Polish as well, because it's also same language group. But I would say maybe now if I speak it's just like my mouth is, it in Spanish it's cuesta trabajo. It's just like it costs you work to do it, and sometimes you get confused. And also Italian, I did speak pretty well Italian. I can do it once I'm back to Italy. I think like 2 years ago in summer, I spent there like a couple of weeks. You speak, and that's where you need to go off your comfort zone. You know that you can speak English, you can speak Spanish to them, they will understand. You can mix Spanish and Italian, but you try to, this is like, try this little mechanism inside that doesn't have enough oil. Just put oil inside, like, work it, you need to work again. Like a car, you put it for winter in your garage, and then like when you try to start, it's like, the same stuff here.
Yeah.
So this is situation. I have some languages in an active way and some of them passive that I can read, can listen, can talk if I want, but I don't feel very comfortable about it. But it's also an opportunity to practice it, just like getting back to it and doing it.
And which one was the hardest for you to learn?
The hardest, Mandarin. I didn't mention Mandarin because I could speak like basic level, like A2, go to buy, meet people, I don't know, speak to the taxi driver and this kind of stuff. So you can survive, because I remember I even spent 1 month hitchhiking in all throughout China. So that was an advantage because then later when I came back to university and I took a course like, of basic Mandarin, my speaking was, I didn't know anything to write, to read, but my speaking was like the level of people who studied 2 semesters of Chinese. Just like spending 1 month, I had so much vocabulary that I could use just to survive and to make myself understand that I could travel comfortably. That was a challenge. So I think Chinese is one of the most challenging because Slavic languages, Germanic language group, Roman language group, they are still Indo-European languages. They have the same. Mama is mama. Actually in China it's the same. No, papa and like a lot of stuff. But there is completely different way. Like the logic is completely different.
And so when, because like right now I'm having a terrible time trying to learn Italian. It's just I speak Portuguese and I speak Spanish, and for some reason you would think that those two would make learning Italian much easier, but it's just no, it's not clicking in my head. So it seems that the grammatical structure is relatively similar. But they're just, I don't know, I'm having a much harder time learning Italian as I did like more time. I'm having a harder time learning Italian than I did with Spanish. So with Spanish, it was just basically never like this past few months when we were in Central America. That's like technically the first time that I got to practice Spanish since high school, because I took high school classes in Spanish. But we all know, like, the languages that you learn in high school, by the time you finish high school, like the vast majority of people, they just forget it. But with Italian, it's just it's quite difficult. So how did you approach this romance languages?
I think what happened, maybe what's happening to you is sometimes when you know languages of same language group and they are so similar, sometimes it makes it more complicated if they would be different. I mean, they just get confused. Yeah. And if they are not practiced well, at some point, I remember when I was studying at the university, I was doing always side jobs. So I was like a receptionist in the hotel. And, Czech Republic, Prague, people from everywhere. You can practice Polish, Serbian, German, Italian, same day, And I was like, I had like a house with different rooms, like with well-defined rooms, and like there is a door. Okay, I close this door and I come to another room and everything was well-defined. The less we kind of like practice them, the walls become thinner. At some point, they're almost invisible, like a wall of a curtain, So you can do like this with a curtain and you're here. And then you're there. No, so that's something that could be like with Italian and Spanish. That's something what is happening to me whenever I want to speak Italian. Just Spanish, it's just cannibalizing it. It's like boom, everything comes in Spanish just because my mind is working. I think it's mostly about having enough time, like practice. And at some point, what was helping me to keep the walls in my house, linguistic house, firm, was reading. Every day. I was reading Euronews, because in Euronews you have, or like Deutsche Welle, you have all kind of languages, no? And then you read like one article per day, and then once you're on the phone, you can click on them, and the translation comes up. So you kind of like, and I would read like aloud, not only reading, but aloud. So it's kind of like practicing, but also reading. Yeah. So this kind of like was helping me. At some point I stopped doing it, because I was kind of like busy with other things, but it's a good practice for your brain. So maybe I would go back to it. But when I was learning Italian, I think it was easier for me because my basis was English. And for me it was so, like people would ask, hey, how could you learn Italian? Because it's so similar to English. It's like, really? Yes. Because in English, it's 30% of the subtract is Roman. Then 60% is or something Germanic, 10% is Celtic, and maybe some other, words from around the world. So, but 30%, almost all the time you have, if you know English and upper intermediate level, you know two synonyms. And one will be something that can help you. You learn German easy, for example, to answer, antworten in German. And then to respond, rispondere in Italiano, So if you know these two languages, okay, one is for German, one is Italian. If you know English, you can easily learn German and listen easily Italian. And the grammar is pretty simple. Present perfect, continuous, blah, blah, blah. It's all the same, just like to learn the grammar and then vocabulary, and that's it. When I came to Mexico, the way people were laughing at me, at my Spanish, they understood it because I also took a course. I spent quite a lot of time with Spaniards during my exchange year in Italy. So they would speak to me in Spanish. I would reply in them Italian, but I understood everything. At some point, okay, let's take a course. So whenever I was traveling to Spain, I understood everything, and I would explain myself in Italo-Spanish, which means I would use everything in Italian, but instead of zione, I would put sion. Instead of, all this kind of like standard stuff. And that's why it would sound funny. Sometimes you don't get what you want. For example, in Italian, caldo is warm, but in Spanish, at least in Mexico, it's soup. So it's like, what?
See it's those differences that are starting to really mess me up. Like there are certain words that I'm like, oh, I know what this is. Like in Italian, I just learned like a room, camera. But camera is the room. Like how? In every other language that I know, camera is not a room, right? And then in Italian, they just throw random words in there. It seems like they're throwing random words and assigning a completely different meaning than the meaning that I've spent so much time like associating it with. But I love languages. Have you forgotten a language? I used to speak this dialect from Mozambique, the province of Maputo. It's called Mashangan. It's an Afrikaans-based language. Or is it a Tonga? I'm not sure. And I used to speak it for like, I don't know, 3, 4 years when I was really little, and now it's just, it only comes out when I'm pissed. When I'm really mad, the Mashangan comes out. But yeah, that's the name of the language is Mashangan. But otherwise, I've completely forgotten it. Or if I'm complaining about something, I complain in Mashangan. It's kind of weird. But other than that, I've pretty much completely forgotten it. Do you have any language that you've kind of just basically forgotten it?
Do you mean you forgot it, that your speaking is on is passive now, but you can still understand once you're there, or it's you don't even understand?
I went there a year and a half ago. A year and a half ago, yeah. And I would be able to understand certain things. So I went to a local market, and after this guy, he was just trying to heckle me for too long, and the Mashangan came out of nowhere. I was like, dude, you're trying to rip me off in Mashangan, and I hadn't even said that in like, I don't know, 15 years. So there's certain triggers, I suppose, that bring certain words out of me. So maybe I've like completely forgotten it, but out of laziness, right? So if I put my best foot forward, I could be able to like regain it. But on the surface level, when I'm listening to music, I understand 60% of what's being said. If I'm watching a show or sorts, I'll be able to understand, yeah, like I said, 60%. But to speak, it's quite difficult.
I think in this context, I would say, yeah. I mean, some of the languages like German and Italian, the speaking language became passive because I haven't like used it. I haven't been practicing on a regular basis. So maybe I would understand, like, I think in Italian, like 80-90%. I would say 90% because it's in German probably like 70. I would say, because it was like a little bit like lower the level. But I think whatever like the language, whenever it gets the level of quite, I don't know, at least like B2 upper intermediate or something like this, once we have this kind of like strong conversation level, it's like riding a bicycle. You don't ride bicycle for years, and you take it, you go. Maybe you don't know how to balance from it, but then like, oh, just push yourself and go. But it's just about having a correct environment. So you come back. The same is with Mashangan. No, you come back. You live there maybe for a month or two. You go to the market to talk to these people. You're back with this language. So it's not lost. It's not forgotten. It's just a little bit deeper because somewhere over there. Yeah.
Well, thanks for that. It gives me a little bit of a hope. And it's it was Mashangan that's basically gone, and then Swahili and Kinyarwanda. I have more practice with Kinyarwanda, like more recent practice with Kinyarwanda. Swahili is just above Mashangan, as you said. They're both deep in the head, but like Mashangan is deeper, and then Swahili, and then Kinyarwanda. Portuguese and Spanish. I spoke Portuguese for 10 plus years on a regular, so it's pretty strong. I probably still have dreams in Portuguese. And then Spanish would be third, and then English now is my primary. And it's sound kind of weird, but I don't even remember like fully learning English. You mentioned earlier about this not the shame, but just like not wanting to like mispronounce things earlier on. And I remember that was one of the hurdles that I thought I had to get over when I was learning English. So, because the previous languages that I had learned, Mashangan, Swahili, Kinyarwanda, Portuguese, is like whenever I knew that I was fluent, when I was indistinguishable from the natives, right? So at some point I spoke Mashangan so much that I was literally indistinguishable from the local kids. You couldn't tell that I had like I didn't have an accent, I didn't have anything like that. So that was my standard for fluency, right? So when I was here for like 6 years, 7 years, here meaning in the States, 6, 7 years, and the first thing that someone asks me when I start a conversation with them is, "Where are you from?" All of a sudden I was like, man, maybe I'm not quite fluent with this language yet. So that I carried that with me for a minute until enough people were like, hey, I like the accent that you have. Where you from? then that changed my perspective. That, okay, I can still be like my definition of fluency does not have to be tied to my ability to have like a perfect accent, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's here maybe one of the fears is like our basic necessity of a human is to feel part of something, part of a family, society, country, culture, language, and that's kind of like the fear. Oh, am I gonna be accepted by due to the way how I speak? If I do this like pronunciation mistakes or something, you know, and I think it's somewhere subconsciously, no. But once we ask ourselves like, oh, what's going on? What's the problem? Like, do you really are you like do you afraid that people will not accept you? Which is not, and in most of the cases, again, this fear of like, when the cortisol is coming up, when probably it's thousands of years ago when our ancestors were hunting and the tiger or the bear would come, yeah, you need cortisol. But now, in most of the situations, humans, when we live in urban areas and so on,
Yeah.
really there is no need for cortisol for survival physical. We are absolutely safe. And all the problems which come here, they are mental. And not the problems, but like challenges and fears, like, fears of, this person will not like me, or they will not accept me, or my girlfriend, boyfriend will think this and that, But once we ask ourselves what's going to happen, I don't care. This kind of stoic Buddhist approach, whatever happens in the end, I know maybe it's like too philosophical, but in the end, we start this life, from the earth, and we go back to the earth. No, I mean, and then we have this little moment which is nothing. Milli, it's like 0, 0, 0. Almost minus infinity compared to the universe, compared to anything. Our life is like completely nothing. We have this little period, so why do we need to worry about these insignificant things? About.
Yeah. Don't worry, be happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're gonna come to a close here. I got 3 more questions for you, and then we'll see how this we're gonna bring this to an end. During your travels, what would you say is the most afraid you've been for your safety?
The worst, like, something that I was more afraid about.
Like, for example, like for me, we were in Uganda. Well, I guess I don't know if this is gonna. This is the example that comes to mind right away. I could be wrong. We were in Uganda in a tiny town called Kisoro. That's Kisoro. It's near the border with Congo, and it's pitch black. And my woman and I are walking back home from the store, and this motorcycle just like rides past us, and then he does a U-turn, and then slowly starts to come up behind us. I'm like, okay, it's no bueno. So I tell my lady to bring the backpack forward, walk in front of me, and we start picking up the speed a little bit, and the motorcycle keeps getting closer and closer, and it's slowing down. It's like directly behind us, right? And it just, long story short, it turns out it was my uncle, right? He was just, he recognized us, and he was coming to say hi, right? So I felt afraid for no particular reason. And I haven't had a really terrible experience that I felt like my life was in danger. But sometimes that's not the story for everyone else. So do you have an example of time that you were
Yeah, I think my mind would go similar direction, because in the end, in the pyramid of needs, the safety is the first one, the basic. Okay, we need to eat, we need to do some physiological stuff, and then the safety comes, physical, emotional, and so on.
Yeah.
So physical safety, I think that's the first one. And I've been in Mexico for 6 years. A lot of people, online there is kind of like ambiguous reputation of Mexico. It's a beautiful country, but with a lot of insecurity, which is correct. And it's just about being sensible and not being where you don't need to be, and feel it, kind of have this empathy of like, okay, I need to be here now. I feel safe. So whenever some, friends come, or maybe some customers, because we run tours, or there is a company called Vibe Adventures. We run tours here in Mexico and the region. When the customers come, oh, like, give me some safety tips. I mean, okay, I can give you a lot of tips, but first of all, don't show up your that you have a lot of earrings, a lot of like stuff. Be simple and always don't be in your phone, like, because again, somebody with motorcycle can just pass and grab your phone and so on. Not always this happens, but there is always a chance. But the main kind of like advice I give is to trust your gut. Whenever you walk on the street and you feel like safe, continue. If you don't feel safe, for example, it's too dark, it's not enough people. That's kind of like the main things. Go to the next street where it's you have more people and it's not that dark. Yeah, so it's the same. So I did feel this, several times, especially like, in some parts of Mexico City in the night, you see there are some people, a little bit sketchy. They will be, like, especially when they would approach, sometimes I would need to go quicker, to go to another street. But then it's an experience. Okay, I'm not going to do it anymore. But one example that comes to my mind during pandemics, when it started, January 2020, a friend of mine from China came over with his girlfriend, and he was happy. Wow, we escaped Corona, because in 2 days they closed the country, and he was so happy. In the end, he stayed for half a year because, everything, his flights got canceled, but he had chance to practice Spanish, to learn, to visit a lot of places in Mexico. So we went on a road trip by car. And we were going to Oaxaca coast in the south, which is a very beautiful place, a lot of good for surfing, one of the best top 10 places for surfing, like international competitions is there. It's called Puerto Escondido. And I love this going like by free roads in Mexico, because on a highway, you go and you see nothing. It's just like asphalt. On the free roads, the advantage is that you see little towns, you can try food, a lot of stuff, forests, and you can discover. The disadvantage is that it's not that safe, especially when it's dark. And we had the idea, okay, we are not going to drive when it's dark. But by same reason, we met some people and they recommended there is like amazing hot springs, and they were amazing, just for locals, hidden, absolutely hot. And we enjoyed it, and we were going. And the problem there is it's semi-desert. The villages are like 20, 30, 50 kilometers between each other. And not all of them, they have even like bed and breakfast to stay. So to the next village, we had to go further. So it was already dark. We were driving. The car was rented with the place from another state. And there was, at the turn, there was like one black car tuned, with like all this decoration style, like looked like a little bit. And whenever we passed, it just started boom after us. And it started going with us. Yeah. A friend of mine, he speaks Russian, his girlfriend doesn't. So I didn't want her to worry. So I talked to him just in Russian. Like, hey, with this car, don't let it surpass us. Because there is no one absolutely, on the road, and it was silly from our side. So I asked him, please, and he's a good driver. So he was going quickly, not letting, because it wanted to surpass us on the turns. So we could luckily go all the way until like a village. And that's where, it just passed and go. We waited for there. So that was kind of like most of the cortisol that I felt during my travel. That was about that. And it lasted for about 10, 15 minutes, all the way until we.
Okay.
Yeah. But it was my mistake. Sometimes things happen, but yeah. If you guys in Mexico on the free road, don't drive when it's dark. Not recommended. Unless it's a very busy highway, because some highways, like free highways, they're busy and you can just be part of the caravan of 10 cars, you go and so on. But if you feel that it's desolate, not many people, not many cars, not recommended.
¿Y qué parte de México? Which part of Mexico are you in?
Eso fue en Oaxaca. It was, when you come from Mexico City to the place is called Pinoteca Nacional, there is this kind of highway that is not touristic at all. It's just used by some trailers, by some people. It's a cacti all around. It's like semi-desert. A lot of nice, I love off the beaten track places, not touristic, to discover something. Even in Google Maps, you cannot find it. You need to talk to people, and then they tell you, oh, there is this beautiful lagoon there. Oh, there is this beautiful cave with a river inside. Oh, there is this beautiful hot spring. So that's how we discovered them. And that's how we kind of changed a little bit our plan of the day. And let's do a detour a little bit. And that's why we came late instead of like finishing in the hotel by the time it's dark. So yeah.
Okay. Well, and that's a good segue to this final question here that I have for you. Um, what are some tips that you can give to people that are considering to travel to Mexico for the first time?
For the first time, I think is get investigate well and get rid of unnecessary fears. Yeah, because a lot of fears, they don't have ground. They are implanted by media, news, and so on. Mexico is a beautiful country. People are very friendly, and in most of the cases, you can be absolutely safe during the day, almost everywhere. During the night, again, feel your gut. If you're in a place with a lot of people, it's you don't need to worry about anything. When it's a desolate place, yeah, that's when you need to first think, do you need to go there or no? In 99% of cases, you don't need to go to these places unless you're looking for it, because you can go find online which places are more dangerous than others, which municipalities are more dangerous than others, which parts of the city are more dangerous than others. So if you go there, it's your own choice to go. And, you can, in some places, I would just say, don't go there at all. There is nothing you need to find. In some places you can, but just go during the day, be careful, don't show up, be sensible. And maybe sometimes it's good to have a local friend. I used to travel a lot and whenever I have time, like I do, with couch surfing, maybe not staying overnight, but, at least meeting people, hangouts, asking to show you around, because that's the way how you can really meet the people, by knowing the local, by talking to them, by knowing about culture and so on. So first of all, guys, make your preparation, get rid of the fears you don't want to have, and meet local people. Whenever you're with local people, you have a much better time when you're just by yourself. And whether it's a guide that you contract, or whether it's another person, a friend of yours, or you go to platforms like Couchsurfing, Show Around, or something similar to connect with people, and that's it. And just be open. Be open. Get rid of these stereotypes we have in Mexico. Some of the best things are not official, or not kind of like what in other places you would expect. One of the best food you can try in Mexico is in the market. You need to go to the market. It's very simple. You see it. You see this woman and her daughter cooking in front of you, but it's one of the best local flavors you can get. Yeah, instead of going to a restaurant, expensive one, where maybe the food is not going to be bad, but the taste is not going to be the same. It's not like the home taste. Yeah, or or just like going to smaller bars, or going to sometimes off the beaten track places, not just going to very famous ones. Sometimes, you also need to consider how far is it? I would say safety is not on my top 5 priority in Mexico. You need to be sensitive, but it's not on top of my mind list. Yeah, it's a little bit exaggerated, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, the way that I think of it is if you're traveling somewhere, a country that you've never been to, and the establishments that you're visiting are the same ones that you have back home, so it's no different than being at home, then why travel to begin with, right? So what you're saying is
exactly
go off the beaten path, try the little local shop that nobody, really has a Google review on it. Just that's a huge part of tasting the culture and getting to know a little bit more about what the country is all about.
For example, I would always recommend if you go, you try local drinks instead of Coke. It's like, oh, what this?
Yeah.
Maybe it's owned by Coca-Cola already. Unfortunately, a lot of local, but still it has a local taste. Or you get a beer instead of Heineken, you get, oh, what's that? Or the local shops. Maybe if there is no Google reviews, my tip is always look where there are a lot of people. If there are 3 stands, and one stand is full, one is empty, and one has a couple of people, go where all the people, because they are locals. They know that it's a good value, And one resource I would like to recommend that helped me a lot in my travels, when you want to have a basic information about destination you go, is called, before it was called Wiki Travel, now it's Wiki Voyage, is a little bit more. It's like Wikipedia for travelers. It's open source, written by travelers. So you get there all the basic you need about historical background, cultural background, linguistic, safety. There is always a big part of there, main safety tips, places to visit, and so on. So it's basically made by independent travelers, very often backpackers for independent travelers. So that's kind of like basic. When you go, you don't get lost. You know all the basic you need.
Wow. Alex, thank you so much for all those tips. Traveling as a means for personal growth. When will you go back to Belarus?
I'm planning for the second half of the year, either last quarter or anywhere between September and October. That's on my list, because also it's a low season, kind of like, because I work in travel industry. It's a lower season, so I'm already fine. Most of our team, we do distant or remote work. We have this chance to take a couple of months vacations to go completely far away and work from there. So that's something what I'm going to do. I'm just going to take a couple of months and do my vacations from there. The only difference is there is like a time zone, but you can always adjust. If you really want, you can do it.
You want to tell the audience what you do for work and how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, as was mentioned, I run Vibe Adventures. It's a small group adventure company. We organize one-day and multi-day private and customized and small group adventure tours inside Mexico, but also in neighboring countries like Guatemala, Belize, El Salvador. And we also work with a couple of like local operators to basically supply their services to the travelers. So if guys, you are planning to visit this part of the world, we'll be more than happy to help you with this. Just visit vibeadventures.com and check out what we offer. Or if you want something like customized, something special, just drop us a line, and yeah, we'll be more than happy to get back to you and help as much as we can.
Alex, it's been great having you on the Moses Kabandana Podcast. Have a good Friday.
Thank you, Moses. Have a nice day as well. Thank you, guys.